Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the Basic Negotiations course from the Michigan Professional Firefighters Union and kind of hosted by your Education and Training Committee. Today, we're going to do a really quick overview over basic negotiations and basically the whole process of negotiations. We're going to do this in less than an hour. So you can literally take negotiation courses for college semesters. So obviously this is going to be a really quick flyover. There's a ton of other opportunities to hone your skills and to really get some better information, or I should say better information, but more in-depth information. And we'll talk about some of that as the course goes on. So we're going to just go over this and kind of get through here. Today, we're going to be joined by 3 instructors, including myself. My name's Sean Abbey. I'm District Vice President for the 2nd District on the west side of the state. I'm also an IFF service rep. In that capacity, I do contracts all the time. So I think over the last year, I've been involved with like 8 contracts, including actually my own locals last summer. I do a lot of contract negotiations, so hopefully that brings something to the table. I've been an IFF service rep and a VP for over 10 years. And before that, I served on my local in Kentwood and the executive board there on most of those positions, including president of the local. And I think I've negotiated I've been there 25 years, and I think I've been on the negotiation team for every contract except the very first one, which was being voted on when I started. So going back over 20 years of doing contracts. Joining me today, I got our lead instructor. And by the way, I'm going to be doing most of the tech today, so I'll be answering questions and answering hands and things like that as we go. We'll talk about that in a second. But joining me is our lead instructor today, Andy.
Hi, everybody. Andy Hood, Harrison Township, Local 1737. Vice Chair of the State's Education and Training Committee. Served on this committee for a number of years, as well as in my own local, probably half of my career, 20 plus years career. And I've negotiated and been part of negotiations for many of our contracts here. And looking forward to helping through this today. Like Sean said, it's going to be a brief flyover of the steps, and we typically try to do a collective bargaining seminar every couple of years where you can spend days going over some of this material.
You guys all like my headset? It's pretty rocking. Joining us today, we've got some new members on our Education Training Committee, which is who puts all these courses together. And joining us today, we have Ken Barnes from Delta Township. Ken, you out there? He's going to kind of be all right. He'll kind of be in the background and kind of see how this goes. And we're looking for other people to kind of take the reins. And Ken's one of those guys up and coming, and we're glad he's on our committee. You know, open your webcam real quick there, Ken, if you can. So there right there. How you doing, Ken? All right.
Good,
so that's your team. Thanks for joining us, Ken, and we're gonna get this thing going. One thing, we are recording this, so this whole thing will be recorded. We've got many, I shouldn't say many, we just started kind of recording. I think there's 2 on the website now. We recorded our Duty of Fair Representation course this morning, so that DFR course will be available on the website as well as this. So if someone wasn't able to make it, this will be recorded as well, so you'll be have a chance to take a look at that. Real quick, one of the things, we really want this to be interactive. And so I'm going to launch a couple polls as we go. You'll see your little thing on the side there, your taskbar to kind of make things happen. You see down there, there's a place to ask questions. If you want to chat, you can chat with a specific person in the room, or you can chat with, send something just directly to me or whatever. You can type in questions there too, and I'll read those. You can also raise your hand. So there's an area where you can raise your hand as well. So make sure you use all those things to your advantage, because really probably the biggest downfall to a webinar is the fact that we're not there and some of that interaction gets lost, but we really don't want that. We want you to be interactive with us. So if you have questions or anything, raise your hand. We'll be happy to call on you and answer any questions you have, or type them in and send them out. One of the other things we've got is handouts. You'll see them down here where my cursor's at. There's some handouts on there, so make sure you get those handouts. There's a negotiations outline, a sample ground rules, and then your change in status form that you should file with MERC before you start negotiating. All right, we're going to do our first poll real quick, and we'll do 2 of these. And the first one is, have you ever bargained a contract? So please go and click on those. It'll take probably 20 seconds or so to answer those. And this is just to kind of see who's in the room and kind of gauge our audience a little bit. All right, we're going to close that. So you have about a quarter of the class, a little over a quarter of the class has bargained a contract, and almost 3/4 of the class has not. So we got a lot of new people out here. So this is really good. This is going to be a great start for that. Like I alluded to earlier, this is going to be a quick flyover in this amount of time, but you should pick up some good stuff and know exactly where you need to go next. Next thing I want to do is just kind of find out how long you've been in your local. So how long you've been in your local? Answer that real quick, please. Give this one about 15 seconds. We're almost there. Everybody in? Excellent. All right, so we had a really good mix. We've only got we got 10%, about 0 to 1 year, and then a good group from basically 1 to 20 years. We got a good split there, and then we even got some old guys out there like me, so over 20 years. So glad to have all of you here. Thanks for taking the time today to do this course. And now we're gonna get started. So again, raise your hand, chat. And when I click over like this, that's only because on my computer, that's how I can get to see if you've got questions or anything like that. So that's when you kind of see the screen shift. The slides are just the slides, so you'll be able to get to those as well. All right, and without further ado, I'll turn the show over to Andy.
So as like with everything else, we always throw a disclaimer out at the beginning. This program is intended to serve only as informal guidance on the matters addressed and should not be relied upon as legal advice. Anyone using this program or information provided should rely on his or her own independent judgment or, as appropriate, seek the advice of a competent professional in determining the exercise of reasonable care in any given circumstances. So basically, you can get into some pretty crazy stuff in contract negotiations, and this class is just meant, like Sean said, to give you a brief overview of the process, and some of the things you can do can get you in trouble, a DFR claim, many other things. And if you're ever in question, you need to seek advice of either someone in the know or legal counsel or someone along those lines. So the objectives today, basic understanding of the negotiation process, how to prepare, how to negotiate, mediation and arbitration, and some other questions.
And as we go through, we'll take some breaks. I think there's some questions spots in here, so we'll look to answer questions as we go through. So if you've got anything as we go, we're going to launch our third poll real quick. And when is it the best time to start preparing for upcoming negotiations? So we're going to have some. So go ahead and answer that real quick. One of the slides coming up's got a really good quote on it about preparing. And we're almost all there. Give a couple more seconds. I'm going to close the poll. Excellent. Sorry, this is losing my cursor here. All right, 0% after negotiations begin. That's awesome. 1 month before negotiations, good. You guys are right on track. And really, you know, those bottom two, the two you guys answered yes to there, really are kind of both right. But really, you should be starting the moment you sign your current agreement, because what happens is, you know, 2 days later, something might happen. Like a grievance or something like that, and that's preparing for the next negotiations, because you're already starting to think of things to change going forward. So really, those are both really good answers, the two you guys answered to, but really the correct answer is the moment the last CBA was signed, because you're starting right fresh. So you should have some kind of a book or something like that you're jotting down things that you wish you could change. You know, have a document on your computer, or if you've got a notepad or something like that the local has. But you should already be starting things you want to change in the next contract. Because here's the thing: if you sign let's say a 3-year contract, you know, you can't remember what happened 2.5 years ago. So it's really good to be able to put things down there. I alluded to one earlier in another another course, the DFR course earlier. I had a local that had Independence Day in their contract, and people were arguing when is Independence Day, because if you look at the calendar, one year it fell on a Sunday, so it was observed on the Monday. So they put a note down in the next contract to say, hey, we need to change that so it's July 4th. And so they did that. And that was done 6 months after the contract was done. So it's really good to kind of keep track of that stuff as you go forward. So good results there.
And like Sean said, there's a number of things that during the negotiation process you drop or just don't get as you work through a deal. And if those things are important to your members, they need to stay in the forefront as you work on through your next contract.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Probably the heavy work starts about 6 months out, where you're getting everything together and polling people and everything. But anyways, so in preparation, the most important thing is to be organized. When you're organized and you have all the materials and the data and everything you need right at your fingertips, that's a very big benefit in negotiations. You should walk in there with a binder or binders full of information. So if the other side has a question about something, you know where to find it, you know where to get it. You can flip to the page and give them the information they need. You should know what's coming. Sometimes it's obvious. Sometimes it's not so obvious. Just like we're preparing from the moment we sign a contract for our next contract, so is the other side. The city or township probably gave up some items that they wanted. They dropped them in the negotiations you just finished. So guess what? You know what's coming because you know they're probably coming after those things again.
Real quick, let me give a chance to have someone put a hand up. Anybody want to raise a hand on something they know is coming in their upcoming negotiations? Anybody got something right there? Something you just know for sure that they're going to be talking about. Okay, we got Nick. Go ahead, Nick.
One thing I know for sure, our township's going to come after us for our pensions. Comes up
okay.
Every time, and it's never going away.
All right.
Until they get them.
Yeah, right.
Until they get them.
And that's always something. So that's good. So now, Nick, going forward, what do you know you need to do before you even get to the table?
You got to make sure that you start negotiations by steering them away from that topic. Like, yeah, we're not talking about that.
Right, exactly. And have the facts. For example, a good thing, let's say you've got a defined benefit pension plan, an actual true pension plan, and let's say they want to switch to a defined contribution plan. Well, you need to know the facts going in of how much money it's going to cost them to shut down your current system, because then you're at the table and they're talking all these cost savings and we're getting rid of the unfunded liability. But when you can say, do you realize that we've got 100 members, and of those 100 members, they're all in this defined benefit, and if you shut it down tomorrow, that means no employee coming into our bargaining unit is going to put any money into that plan. So that means you need to preload or front load all those expenses because there's no one else putting money into that coming in. You're basically dead ending that fund. So it's good to kind of have those stats. So thanks, Nick. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
And that's exactly what it's like being organized, right? If you know they're coming after pensions, you probably need to spend quite a bit of time preparing for the pension fight. Survey your comparables, review your actuaries report, see where you're trending, and I'll have all that data reviewed and know it very well.
Oh, yeah, Joe, you there? Joe? Hello? Oh, Joe had his hand up. All right. Okay. Okay, let's keep going. I'm going to get you back on these, but I'm going to answer questions, so I'll let you keep going down this list.
Sounds good. Have an in-depth knowledge of your proposals. Know what your proposals say and what they mean. When you write your proposals, you go through and you put them in contract language and understand them. So make sure you know exactly what you're asking for. Do your research. Research comes in a lot of different forms, and it all comes together in your exhibits. And I'm using an arbitration term, but you should have exhibits ready. If your proposal is about wage increases, not only should you have the wages of all your comparables, you should have the percentage increases they've got over the last year and the last 5 years. All that data is very important. So get your research done.
And I know there's a lot of people who haven't done a contract. So when you talk about comparables, Andy, what are you kind of talking about comparables? So I know some locals have been around for a long time, so they know what they are, and some aren't. But yeah, so when you talk about comparables, what are you kind of talking about?
So when we talk about comparables, part of your background and your preparation is figuring out which communities are similar to yours, both in size, both in organization, region, stuff like that. You'll go through and you'll say, you know what, yeah, this place is a similar size, the community is similar, the firefighters are similar, so everything seems to be close. We'll call that a comparable. And once you've determined your comparables, the city or township's going to do the same thing as well. And at that point, you'll have your comparables picked out, and you can use data from them to help build your arguments.
Casey from Plainfield said that they started an email group for their negotiation team. Then they just email stuff, and they kind of keep that separate. So they've got their own little email group as stuff happens in the contract over there. So as they prepare, they've got that one email group that kind of captures all their ideas and things like that as they go through their contract and prepare for the upcoming negotiations. So that's a good idea too.
Yeah, very good idea. So during preparation, you're also going to pick your team that's going to negotiate. And a lot of places say, all right, well, our executive board is our elected leaders. We're going to elect them to serve as our negotiating team. A lot of locals also elect a negotiating team that's separate from their executive board. What your local does is up to you. But you need to know how you're going to pick that negotiating team, and you can use the strength of those people. Part of your team should have someone that's very good with numbers. Someone should take very good notes. And determine what your team needs. Make sure you guys are all on the same page too. One of the worst things you can do is go in there and while you're at the negotiating table, have a disagreement on your team in front of the other side.
Yeah, for sure.
And also know their team. You've got to know how their team operates, how you can. I don't want to use the term manipulate, but if you know the strengths and weaknesses of the people you're negotiating against, you can have an upper hand. That's importantly, failing.
I'm sorry, Andy. That's really key.
Oh, go ahead, John.
That's really key with some of these, because I've had negotiations before where you just might have a hardcore person that's not going to give an inch, and so you're in for a battle. And then I have other times where management seems to be a little more willing to work with the union, and so you can hopefully gain some ground. And those aren't anything different. I mean, that's just a management style. Some managers believe they don't want to give an inch because it shows they're weak, and other ones are like, hey, I want to have a decent workplace, so I want to work with the union so we can get the best contract possible to keep morale up and keep people happy and keep people employed. So it just depends where you're at. It's funny because I've seen a little of both. In one of the contracts I just recently did, the other side was actually giving us stuff. They were like, there were some dental things and things like that they'd made changes, and they were actually giving us more stuff than we were even asking for, which was like almost unheard of. But knowing that about their team was good because it's like, okay, they showed a little bit of compassion and things like that. So again, we're not trying to take advantage of that. We'll talk more about negotiations as we go, but it's just good to know where their team sits. If they're going to be hardcore, or and those relationships too. If you've been doing some good politicking and things like that, it's good to know if you have some relationships built already with people across the table.
And tying back into one of our poll questions there, failing to prepare is preparing to fail. You start working on this process as soon as you sign your previous contract, but 6 months out is really you're getting current data, you're getting everything together. And that 6 months prior to beginning negotiations, it's very, very time consuming. You're going to be putting in hours and hours and getting stuff together. Some of our last negotiations, that 6 months, where our executive board or negotiating team was meeting, twice a week for 8 hours. And you gotta put the time in to get the data together, to be prepared and get on the same page.
I had a question from Richard. He's asking, should comparables be limited to your county, state, or can ones be used from out of state?
So that's a good question. Most places you want your comparables to be closer to you, right? So if you pick, and I'm going to use some extreme examples here, but we take a UP city with a small local of, say, 16 or 18 people. That's really tough to compare that local to the city of Detroit. So your local, it's easier in the Southeast Michigan area where I work because we have similar sized locals that are both in and outside the county, and within a radius of, say, I don't know, 30 or 40 miles. You do kind of want to use what's closer if you can. However, that's not always the case. You can't always do that.
And from out of state, you have to remember too, Richard, that out of state, their laws are going to be much different. I mean, in Michigan, we have certain bargaining laws. And that's a whole nother addition to this class. We have our PARA and our Public Act 312, which are the rules and laws that kind of govern our bargaining. So that's germane to Michigan. So Indiana, for example, they have very poor collective bargaining laws and bargaining arbitration. Ohio's got very strong ones. Obviously, Wisconsin's actually not too bad, but they're kind of teetering a little bit too, just like Michigan. But yeah, so out of state's going to be tough because of the markets you're in a different state, so it's going to be a little more difficult to do. I have been trying to use where people are coming from. So recently, I've been in some locals where they're drawing a lot of their workforce from like a different part of the state. So I've kind of been trying to use that argument saying, the last 5 people, let's say it's in Upper Michigan, and I said the last 5 people you've hired is from the Metro Detroit market. So I've been saying, hey, you're drawing these people up here. We want to keep them here because what's happening is they're coming up there and they're not getting the wages they're used to, and then they're going back. So you don't want that. A lot of times too, you guys sell stuff on your package that you're helping them. You want to create a place where people want to stay and want to have a career, because that's obviously going to foster a better fire department.
PA 312 does have a number of criteria that they can use to establish comparables in an arbitration case. Size of community, education, demographics, all sorts of different stuff. But at the end of the day, even comparables are negotiable. So if you make a good case for, well, I like this local, it's similar in size to us, similar work, things like that. As long as you make a strong case, the other side might agree to that.
I hope that answered your question, Richard.
So moving on to the next step. Once we've part of preparing here is also polling your members. One thing a lot of locals do is have their members offer up a wish list. My local, our executive board, or whoever the negotiating team is, says, hey, we're getting ready to begin the negotiation process, send me a wish list. And basically members will email in a list to the executive board or whoever the negotiating team is, say, hey, these are things I think we should change in the contract, this and this and this. And then it's the job of your negotiating team to go through those items, classify similar items, throw away items that are just so outside the realm of reality that that's not reasonable. And then start really getting down into the nitty gritty. Someone's going to say, hey, I want raises. Hey, I need a 10% raise. Hey, I need more money. So those kind of things all go together to one part of the wish list, raises. You've got to look at what items are economic versus non-economic. And that's sometimes very hard to tell as well. If you look at vacation day, is that economic or non-economic? Well, you could make the argument that if someone takes a vacation day and it causes overtime, it causes an increase in cost to the community, then it may be economic. But you got to break them down versus strict economic versus non-economic items. Once you have this list together and consolidated, and you can throw away the guy that says I need a 15% raise and kind of lump that one in with we want an increase in rate of pay. And then get it to your membership to review. And if you do that at a membership meeting, that's great. People get to have input, and then everybody can talk about what's on the wish list, and have the members kind of prioritize it. And sometimes it's some locals go through, hey, I want you to rank all 10 of these items, most important to least important. And some they have general conversations about the items, and the negotiating team gets a good sense of what's important to the membership.
Yeah, I think that's crucial, Andy, for going into the table, because when you're going in that table, if the team has a great idea of what the membership's looking for, then you're just setting yourself up for success. I'm a big proponent of any type of be open communications, because here's the thing: during negotiations, it's closed door. We're not involving the general membership in anything until we get a tentative agreement. So if you don't talk to them before you start negotiating, you're not talking to them during negotiation. When it's finally time to talk to them about a TA, that they're going to be thrown some things that they're not ready for, or that they might not even anticipate. And so just gonna, so this is their chance to give that input. So it's so important, because now if you get TAs on things, you're confident at the table that if I TA this was my member's number one thing and I got it for them, I know for sure that that's going to have a huge impact on my negotiations. If I don't know that, you're kind of just guessing, and it's like, keep your members informed, keep them in the loop, and it just kind of cuts down on those surprises.
And then as you go through the economic and non-economic items, you want to kind of rank both sides. If money's tight this year and you can get a bunch of the higher non-economic issues and not get some of the economic issues, well, that might be a balance that your membership can live with. So make sure you rank both sides so you know what's important both economically and non-economically to your members. Review your collective bargaining agreements. Start with your current collective bargaining agreement and review it. You should, from the day you sign your last contract, have some form of record keeping as to issues for the next contract. Start on page 1 of your CBA and go through, hey, this issue came up 6 months ago, but Article 1, Section 3, there was a problem there. We had an issue. All right, let's put that on the table. Go through comparable collective bargaining agreements. If you have a comparable community, you can look at what they have in their collective bargaining agreement that you don't have and maybe get some ideas as to where you can make improvements. Review the notes from the previous negotiations. This could give you some insight into what the other side may be willing to let go or give you that they didn't get last time, or vice versa. So, understand where each party is coming from based on the previous negotiations. Talk to past negotiation team members and see what they had to say. They might have a good sense of what might be coming, where you might need to go, what you could probably obtain easily, some things that might not be easily obtained.
Real quick, Andy, our local started a file sharing like 2 or 3 negotiations ago. So we basically created a Dropbox folder, but there's tons of file sharing programs out there. But what we've done is in that Dropbox, we've basically thrown all of our notes, all of our CBAs are in there for the last, I don't know, as many digital ones as we had. So there's a ton of them in there. And then all of our notes are in there. Each negotiation year's got like a folder, what we've asked for, our notes, kind of how that went, and then each agreement. And so if you've got something like that, that can be passed on. I mean, I just get so excited about that because, I'm getting towards the end of my career, and now people will be able to go back and see kind of how things went going forward. And you're setting future generations of negotiations. You're helping them out. You're giving them tools to, okay, they see exactly why we have this particular provision, or they see how that was done. So it's kind of a nice thing to have. So I really do think that's a great thing to be able to have something like that, whether it be a folder or a guide or some kind of sharing software like that, to be able to keep track of all that stuff long term.
Absolutely. I could. Oh, go ahead, Kevin.
It's Ken.
Real quick, this is the first time that we've done it at our local, and because as you go through a year or two on a contract, you forget about, hey, I forgot, oh yeah, somebody mentioned that, and we should have changed that in the contract. I actually have a copy of our contract, and whenever an issue is brought up or language is a little fuzzy, I've highlighted that. So as a reminder, when we start to approach negotiations, we have that instead of trying to use our brains to try to remember it.
That's a great idea, Ken.
Yeah, very good. Very good idea on how to keep track of issues. Some locals, whenever they have an issue, they've got a binder that they'll type up the issue, 3-hole punch it, put it in the binder, and when it comes time to prep for negotiations, they pull the binder out and see what issues they've had over the term of the collective bargaining agreement. And history is something that as Sean was touching on, can't be replaced. Going back in my local, since probably about 2009, previously, we've had no good negotiation notes. So we're kind of almost starting at scratch when we started keeping good notes around that time. Now, going back, we can pull out binders that go through the entire process, from our initial proposals, negotiation notes, and everything, through the collective bargaining agreement process and contract TA ratification, so that you have that history. Unfortunately, my local doesn't have it before around 2009, 2010, but we're preserving that for going forward. Another good place is your local's attorney. Once you start talking about issues and you've met with your members and you have a good idea, it's probably a good idea to meet with your attorney. They'll probably have some good ideas as to what you can, which direction to move, which things are good ideas, which things are bad ideas, as they work with a number of different locals as well. IAFF field service rep. We have one, Sean Abbey here, is an IAFF field service rep. And, they work with many different locals on their collective bargaining agreements and are a good resource as well. Again, read your entire collective bargaining agreement. Anything that stands out to you as you read through it that might need changing is a potential for an issue to be brought to negotiation. And then meet with other groups. Most communities have a number of different bargaining units. They could have DPW, police, the AFSCME local, that's secretaries and everything else. Talk to them, see what they've been successful with, what they've been unsuccessful with, and things that you could potentially move forward with your local as well.
All right, anybody got any questions? Looking down. Everybody doing good? All right, excellent. We are making good progress.
So a number of documents you can get together when you're preparing for negotiation. Budgets. It's a good idea every year for your local to get budgets, amended budget amendments, and then the audited year-end statistics. All of these things can show where the money is for your local expenditures. IAFF Municipal Financial Analysis. The IAFF does a great job putting together, out of city or township documents, a overall picture of the health of your fire department. Collective bargaining agreements. Make sure you have your last few CBAs. Merck has a number of arbitration decisions, mediation agreements, and things like that you can access. Arbitration awards, state union, we have those on the website, and you can look through those and see, all right, this local had this issue, which is similar to ours. We'll look through and see how the arbitrator awarded it, and that might help you to determine what issues are more important that you want to push harder for, or issues that arbitrators are awarding to the city, so you might want to stay away from that. Me Too clauses are a very good thing to have if you have another 312 unit or any other bargaining unit. We just, in our last contract, got another holiday in our contract. Our AFSCME local negotiated and got one additional holiday. We didn't technically use a Me Too clause, but during the negotiation process, we got that. But a Me Too clause would have the same effect without having to open the contract. If in a section, one bargaining, you put a clause in there that says if this bargaining unit gets this improvement, we get it too.
The big thing I've seen around the state, Andy, on that too, is there's a lot of departments that are combination departments, and I've seen the part-time firefighters or paid on call or whatever they are in that place have a Me Too clause, either formal or informal, that they get whatever raise or benefiting, or I shouldn't say benefits, they really don't get benefits generally, but whatever raise that the union bargains, they get that passed on. Well, the big thing that's important about that is if you have like a 12-person local, let's say, and you've got 30 paid on call, and they've got a Me Too clause. Well, when you're going in there, you have to realize that when you're asking for a 3% raise for your 12 members, if they have a Me Too clause, formal or informal, you're also asking for a 3% raise for all of those other 30 people. So you need to, don't give that to them necessarily, but in your mind, you got to figure out what that cost is that they could potentially be figuring in their head. So for example, if your paid on call budget's $100,000, that's going to go up 3% a year over the course of that contract. So you don't want to give them that necessarily, but you need to keep that in the back of your head that that's what they're thinking. So when they're thinking about those, if they don't want to quite give that, so maybe take a 2% here and maybe take a 1% increase on your longevity, take a bigger increase in your longevity or your food allowance or some other thing that they don't get. So that's kind of why that's kind of important to know if it's out there. And like I said, a lot of them are informal. They're just like a handshake thing where everybody in the city knows that if the union gets this raise, that the non-union or the part-time firefighters are going to get that. And I've kind of seen that around the state. So it's just good to know if those are out there and how to get around those if it becomes sticky.
Yeah, very good point, Sean. So the next part, you've done your background information, you've done all your research, you got everything together, you've polled your members, and you're ready to start drafting proposals. The best way to draft a proposal is put it in contract form. Basically, what that means is if you have something you want to change in Article 1, Section whatever, Section 3, you basically copy that and you strike out the language you want changed and insert the language you want to put into the contract. And you want to begin right at the very beginning. Keep your articles of your contract in order, keep your proposals in that same order, and go through. So as an example, you could have Article 6 entitled Lawn Mowing. And your proposal may be remove entire article language and replace with, and then put in parentheses, at no time shall members of local blank be required to mow any city-owned property. Now there's a number of locals that have that. They mow lawns, and they may not want to do that anymore, but that's the most effective way to clearly articulate what your proposal is. Change the language of the contract to what you want it to read, and you offer that as a proposal.
Real quick, Andy, I had a quick question on the last slide. Mike was asking, how often should you get MFAs done from the IFF, the Municipal Financial Analysis? How often?
You should get an MFA done every single year. It's part of your IFF dues. And it's also very important at minimum in contract years, but you should get it done every year. You pay dues for it, you send them the information they need. It's very easy for them just to keep updating that year to year. And additionally, that'll give you long-term trends. If you've got 10 years of MFAs out there, you can use that data to show trends of financial condition of the community.
Perfect. Hope that answered your question there, Mike. I think that's it. Any other questions? All right, excellent. All right, we're doing good here.
Good.
Sorry, Andy.
Oh, no problem at all. No problem at all. Interrupt whenever. Order of proposals. You want to keep your proposals in order that they're going to appear in a contract. That keeps everything in the easiest form to read, right? You can flip through the contract page by page and see the proposals as they work through in logical progression. Paper versus digital. We should have them digitally stored, but they should be printed out on paper when they're given to the city or township. It's very easy for someone to change a digital proposal. The written paper ones, not so much, and that gives you a place where you can make notes and you can keep notes on that proposal and potentially tweak it that way too. Costing out the proposals. As I said earlier, you want someone that's good with numbers on your team. Have one person on the team prepared to cost out each economic item. And that's a difficult process. Costing out a proposal, we do a class just on costing proposals through the IFF. If you're asking for a 2% raise, you've got to figure what that 2% raise is going to cost the employer for each individual person, tied into every benefit that's tied to pay. If there's a paramedic incentive that's a percentage of pay or longevity or something like that, that increased costs as well, not to mention federal and state taxes.
Yeah, that's a big one. Those extra add-ins. Oh, sorry, Andy. Those extra add-ins.
Yeah, no.
People forget those extra add-ins. Like if you know if you have tied into your pension contributions or your anything else that they're going to have to increase. A lot of people, that's a big mistake. People just take their hourly rate and say, oh, it's 2% above that. There's so much other stuff that goes into how much they pay you, and that 2% is going to affect a lot of other trickle down things, like you mentioned.
And you know that's important in understanding the impact of what you're asking for. If say just to say, all right, well, 2% increases in wage, go through and put all those things together in dollar form, so that you know exactly what that's going to cost. All right, the 2% wage, well, okay, I make 50 grand, so that's not much. But then you add in the paramedic incentive and the longevity, and it applies to this, that, and the other thing, and then also apply it over every member of the local. That can be a big number for a 2% raise, depending on how big your local is.
Just the big thing too on that proposal, that last thing, that understanding the impact is just your impact overall of whatever you're asking for. What trickle down thing? If, for example, we had a local that used safety to get some staffing. So it was good. They got a minimum number of people on their apparatus. But the bad thing about that is the impact ended up being they end up closing down stations. So it's like, yeah, so each apparatus had a certain amount of people on it, but now they started browning out or just simply closing stations. So rather than having 3 stations with 3 people on it, they had 2 stations with 4 people on it. So that's, know what that is. And in that case, that actually cost them a person. It went from 9 people on 3 and 3 to having 8. So just kind of understand the impact of what you're asking for. It could be something blunt like that, or it could be some kind of trickle down, but there's an impact for everything you do. So make sure you understand what that is going in.
So when you're beginning negotiations, you always want to make sure you start early, right? Get your negotiations letter sent to Merck, get it out there, letter to the city requesting dates for initial meeting. Notice Merck that your contract's about to expire and you're beginning negotiations, and I believe that's in our handouts. Right, Sean?
Yep, it is in there.
So that's real simple to do. A lot of locals do it themselves, and some just, hey, have the attorney notice Merck, and all they do is print the same form off and send it off to Merck. Not a big deal, however you decide to do it, but whatever. Make sure it gets done. When Merck gets that notice, they assign a mediator in case you reach an impasse. So you definitely have to notice Merck, and you have to be in negotiations for at least 6 months before you get into mediation. Both sides are going to have proposals, and make sure that they are, when you guys go to your first meeting, that when proposals are exchanged, they're going to exchange their proposals as well. One of the worst things you can do is give them your proposals and not get the city or township's proposals in return. If you're able to swing it and you can get their proposals without giving up your proposals, that could show an advantage on your side. But just understand that if you give them your proposals without receiving theirs, you're at a disadvantage. Merck change in status form. Merck, you notice Merck, they assign a mediator. When you go to your first meeting, it's always best to have meetings at neutral sites. Sometimes the city or township's intimidated when you're at the fire station. When you're in their offices, that can intimidate you. Try to find a neutral site if possible. Sometimes it's not possible, and do the best you can. But a neutral site definitely puts both parties on a level playing field. Not only are you not interrupted with routine firehouse business, if you're on a neutral site, the other side's not going to get called out to walk over to their office to correct an issue, and they can concentrate on negotiations. Appearance. You want to make sure you're dressed appropriately. Jeans and T-shirts are not appropriate. At minimum, you should be wearing khakis and a golf shirt or something that lets them know that you're a professional firefighter. Some locals, larger locals, may use suit and tie. That's up to them. But at minimum, dress appropriately for what you're doing. In the first meeting, you should try to get ground rules. Ground rules are basically the rules of the meeting, whether or not you're going to involve the media. And you shouldn't. You should not have the media involved generally. No one set the dates for the other meetings. Make sure you understand you're going to bargain in good faith, and how you're going to handle caucuses and sidebars. Sometimes when you're at the table, things get a little complicated, and you need to step to the side with your team to refocus, or you might need to meet with one party of the other teams just to iron out one final issue or something like that in a sidebar.
And really, I like having these initial meetings, and just at your initial meeting, kind of let everybody know what's going to happen. Don't blindside anyone. Say, a lot of times what I like doing is saying, okay, we're having an initial meeting. We're going to both do a meet and greet, see who's on each other's teams. We're going to quickly go over some ground rules and then set some meeting dates. And then, excuse me, and then that really kind of just sets it up. And then at that point, you can talk about when you're going to exchange proposals, or when you just don't want to really catch anybody off guard. So I really like that first kind of initial meeting, just a really quick thing in, come in, get everything taken care of, those talking points, things like that. I even had one where I showed up in a tie and suit, and the attorney on their side's like, and this is for the quick one, he's like, hey, I'm all about casual. He was in like a blazer or something. I don't know. But he's like, I'm all about casual. I'm just going forward. I just assume let's be a little more casual, and we don't need to do suit and ties if you're good with that. And I was like, whatever makes this thing go the best it possibly can. So I really like kind of doing that first initial meeting to kind of get things going.
And even if you've got a good relationship, part of the first meeting you establish ground rules. Hey, we're gonna go back and forth. This time I'm going to bring coffee and bagels for breakfast. Next time you guys will. And that, sometimes that helps too. And, if you're on good terms, we've actually brought coffee first. So say, hey, look, we brought stuff. Let's all grab a cup of coffee, sit down and talk. And sometimes that helps break the ice and foster goodwill. So in your meetings, you want to review all the proposals, but be specific with reviewing your proposals and ask questions about them. Read through. If you don't understand something, make sure you ask the question, what exactly do you mean by this, and what's the impact, so that everyone understands what each side is asking. If there's some easy things that you can just agree to right off the table, right off the bat, go ahead and get them off the table. See what you can agree upon without making any changes at all. Okay, yeah, we agree to that. We recognize this is a problem. We want to fix it. Or they might do the same with one of your proposals. You initial it, sign off on it, and that one's off the table. When you do get tentative agreements like that, in that example, we have a proposal that both parties agree to without change. Make sure you sign and date it. Be very specific as to what you're agreeing to, and make sure each party has a TA, and understand that. How you're gonna manage them, if you're gonna keep paper copies, if you're gonna put them into a Dropbox file, or whatever you're gonna do. And as soon as you get all the baseline proposals off the table that both sides agree to, at that point you start going back and forth with proposals. You offer one, they offer one, and you discuss them. You work back and forth until you start agreeing to stuff. And this is the spot where you're gonna start changing language in proposals. And it's a give and take process. If you can't expect to get everything you want and not give anything, so understand that the back and forth give and take process works both ways. You have something that you guys your side can live with, that they really want, and that'll help to move the process along if you find a way to concede to things that are acceptable to you that they want.
I've had some locals, and they get really concerned about the fact that they're giving things up, or they're having to give and take. And I tell you, it's not called getting, it's called negotiations. If it was called getting, everybody would be doing it and it'd go well for everybody every single time. But it's not called getting, it's called negotiation. So just keep that in mind. It is called negotiations. It's a good faith thing. And remember, we're in it for the long term, the long haul. To piss them off at the table for one quick thing that is a quick fix for this second might feel good. But remember, you're going to be negotiating with these people for a long contract and multiple times over the course of your career. So keep that in mind, and I'll just hit on the next one real quick. Andy, if you don't mind, is that Power of Nice book. It kind of talks about that. This is by it's called The Power of Nice. You can get it probably on Amazon or anything like that. It's by Robert Shapiro. he was the negotiator for Cal Ripken during his entire career, and it really talks about win-win negotiating. I've heard it been called before lose-lose too. Some people say lose. They say if both sides leave unhappy, then you did a good job. Well, I'd really like to go more towards if both sides are happy, you did a good job. But it really talks about the relationship of negotiations and how you might feel really good today by sticking it to them, but what are they thinking? They're thinking, damn it, the union stuck it to us. You know what? We need to stick it to them next. Well, now the next time you're negotiating with them or the next time you got an issue, now they're trying to stick it to you. So again, it's about the long-term relationship of negotiations and not just the short-term victories. And that kind of what that includes in that next bullet as well. But we did bring their group in one time for some negotiation training, and I don't know, we could probably maybe look at do that again in the future because it was it was a 2-day seminar they put on. It was one of the best negotiation seminars I've been to. But that's a great book to look into and pick up.
And like Sean said, this is a long-term relationship you have with your employer. Many of us work 20, 30, 40 years even with the same employer. So you want to have a good relationship with them. It's good if your negotiating team has a good relationship with a township board or city council. And remember, you're in it for the long haul. Just because you're done negotiating this contract, it has an expiration date. And you potentially are going to be at the table with the same people again in a few years. So longevity of long-term contract and long-term view is important. And unfortunately, sometimes it doesn't always work out well, and you end up in mediation. Mediation can be helpful if you have both sides that are willing to settle an agreement but are just stuck on some details. It can also be a waste of time. I went through one mediation where, and the job of the mediator is to come in and get the parties closer together. And we were at a position, and Harrison Township was at a position, and we brought in the mediator because we were getting nowhere. And basically, the mediator came in, met with us for probably 3 hours, went in and met with them for an hour, and we offered up, all right, this is really what we can live with. We need, we want to move here, we can move here, we can move here. Mediator went in and met with the township's negotiating team, and they said, no, we're not moving on anything. So in that case, I wasted a day of my time. But at least we knew where we stood, and the township filed for arbitration, which we'll get to next. And it depends on the mediator, too. Sometimes a good mediator can get both parties to move and come together on an issue. And like I said, the mediator meets with both sides first, then separates them and starts working with each side and trying to get them both to come together to an agreement. Mediator is assigned by Merck. When you submit that form that you're beginning negotiations, they assign you a mediator, and they'll tell you who it is, and it's one of the steps towards arbitration. And last but not least, the final, hopefully we don't have to go to step in negotiations, is Public Act 312 binding arbitration. Basically, there's a list of arbitrators that's sent to both parties. You each get to strike some arbitrators, and then whoever's left, if there's only one left, is assigned the arbitrator, or Merck will pick out of whoever's left. But basically, there's a panel. The arbitrator is the neutral third party, and you appoint one person to your panel, and city or township appoints one person to the panel. At this point, you submit to the arbitrator your last best offers on all the outstanding issues. The arbitrator, through a quasi-judicial setting, holds hearings, very similar to a court hearing. There's a stenographer there recording the minutes, and basically each side argues their points, offers evidence, and all this stuff gets entered into the record. At the conclusion of the hearings, each side submits a brief, and then basically the panel meets. However, the union is going to vote for the union side, the city or township is going to vote for the city or township side, so that leaves the arbitrator to side with one of the two parties on each issue. So at the end of the day, the arbitrator is the one making the decision, and this award's binding. It can be appealed to circuit court, However, that's for procedural issues. If you don't like the award, there's really nothing you can do about it. My local went through this process a few years back, a very unfavorable arbitration award, but there's no basis to appeal. It set up for our next negotiations to be pretty tough. However, I commend the guys on the team at that time. They were able to get a contract. I can tell you 312 is bad.
Yeah.
We did not appreciate the process very much at all. We thought we had very strong and solid arguments on our side, but the arbitrator didn't side with us.
Right, and it really depends on that arbitrator. It's the good and bad of arbitrators are when they're picked is like there could be one arbitrator that consistently rules in favor of the union, and so we want that person. And let's say that excuse me, the city couldn't strike them. Well, the city or township in their head they might be saying this arbitrator has ruled 3 times in a row in favor of the union. He's due for to stabilize his voting record. So maybe this time he's going to go for the city, and that can be the case. So you might think some of these arbitrators are like a pro-union arbitrator, a pro-city arbitrator. If they want to stay employed as an arbitrator, that's really not a good road to go down to, because they're going to get stricken every single time by one side or the other. So they might be, let's say they've got 2 contracts where they want union way. So we're thinking, oh man, this is a union guy, but they're looking to correct that voting record. So this time they might be going for the city. So it's kind of one of those things. But it can be good, it can be bad. The bad thing about it is, like Andy alluded to, you're rolling the dice, because at the end of the day, each one of these arbitrators is a person, and they bring all their baggage with them. I literally had an arbitrator tell me one time he ruled against a county contract because, excuse me, on the way to the meeting, the roads were not plowed to his liking. And this particular jurisdiction that he was dealing with, this county, they took care of the roads there. And so he ruled against him just because he didn't like his drive to that meeting. It's like, are you kidding me? I mean, so that's what you're dealing with these people. I mean, it's all on a whim. If they're, I had another one where the arbitrator we found out later, had a family member that was a retirement planner and was sold on defined contribution pension systems. So when this arbitrator, when this municipality wanted to switch to defined contribution pension system, he went to his son and asked him, and he literally in the hearing, he talked about how my son sees these are the best things going and way better than defined benefit. Well, guess what way he ruled? So each one of them brings some baggage with them, and on any given day they can rule any given way. So you're really rolling the dice. It's better to try to get a deal at the table where you can let the facts kind of take care of themselves versus propaganda. So thanks, Andy, for all your work through this. It was a great program. We'll get some questions here in a second. One thing I want to hit on is this knowledge is power. We've got some seminars coming up. There's an IFF MPFFU union seminar coming up on May 22nd and 23rd. There'll be more details coming soon, but use that as a save the date for those. And then we also have some more webinars coming up. We've got the MPFFU webinars on March 22nd. We're going to be doing 2 of those, similar like we did today. We try to do one in the morning and then one in the afternoon, and about an hour long. And one's on union leadership, and the other one's on representing members. Those are very good. And don't forget, we try to record all of our webinars, including this one, and they should be available on mpffu.org for you to take a look at in your leisure. Anyways, well, I'm going to go real quick to the questions. Also, there's a survey that you'll get. Please fill those surveys out, because we're really trying to use this webinar format a little better. Day like today, when it's really cold and crappy out and no one wants to drive anywhere, and we got a huge state, it's kind of nice to be able to reach out to all of you this way. But we're really kind of refining this webinar thing. None of us are professional webinar experts. We're all members and firefighters just like you. So if you haven't got anything you can add to help make this better, we appreciate your comments. So please fill that survey out. And I'm going to end with, is there any questions? Hold on one second. I'll get you. I think it's Brad. It says Brack on here. Is that you, Brad?
Yeah. Yeah, that was a typo when I signed up.
I'm like, man.
You were
Go
talking
ahead.
about, or maybe it was Andy that was talking about seeing the stats or how the recent arbitrators ruled. How do you find those? You know, what the recent rulings were and who they ruled for in their last whatever 3-4 arbitrations.
So the MPFFU posts all the firefighters arbitration cases on the state's website. And also, I believe it's Wayne State University. Is that right, Sean? On their website, maintains a list of all arbitration cases throughout the state. And a lot of that time, you've actually got to sift through them.
Yeah. Yep. There's so that's probably the best way to get them is a state or there. And there's some you can actually go through Merck as well and find those at the state Michigan.gov, and a lot of those are on there as well.
And that'll just explain each other how they ruled for whatever their last
it'll give you it'll give you the whole award. So it'll actually show you the award. Yep. Anything else, Brad?
Yeah, you'll have to search through and see which arbitrator made the ruling, and then kind of look at the award and kind of get a sense for them. And if you know you've got these 2 arbitrators to pick from, you can go research their previous rulings and figure out if where they stand or where you think they're going.
Yeah, you can even reach out to those locals. So let's say it was the arbitrator that in Harrison Township. I can call Andy up and say, hey, what do you think of this arbitrator? And he can give me his 2 cents. So that's good as well. So anything else, Brad?
No, that's all we had here.
Okay, thank you very much. Real quick, I've got a question here. It says from Joe. It says, at what point in negotiations do you use the attorney to speak to the city opposed to the union speaking directly to the city? And do you recommend using your attorney as little as possible, keeping an open line of communication with the city? You want me to take that, or you want it, Andy?
Go ahead. I have some comments I can add too, but
okay.
Go ahead.
Generally, I try to say keep your attorney involved, like Andy alluded to earlier. Maybe have them look at some things going into negotiations, some trends or things that maybe he can look at your contract and maybe tell you some things that he'd like to see cleaned up. But going into your negotiations, if you feel things are fruitful or going fine, then try to keep the attorney away as much as possible for 2 reasons. One, obviously cost, it's money. But 2, sometimes the other side tends to put their hands up a little bit when attorneys start getting involved, because if you call your attorney, they're going to call theirs, and then it ends up being back and forth. If you need to go there, then don't be afraid to, because sometimes that's just the way it goes. I've had good success. Remember, you guys all have IFF service reps in your district. Generally, it's going to be your vice president. And I've had very good luck being called in as a service rep because a lot of these chiefs and cities see us as like a third party, not necessarily mediator, but almost just a third party. They don't want to air their dirty laundry out to other departments and other, you know what I mean? And so they know, when I go in, they know where I'm from. They know what I'm about. I'm sure they've called my city and they know, so they don't want to air their dirty laundry. So I've had a really good success rate with that. The other thing too is if I'm going into a local and they're asking for some crazy shit, excuse my language, I'm going to tell them, hey, this is crazy. There's no way you're going to get this. You guys are, so it kind of can be a reality check. And the good thing about that for the local is you can go back to your membership and say, hey, Sean, who deals with contracts all over the state, and our attorney says there's no way in hell we're getting this, so we should drop this and do something different. That way it kind of takes you off the hook almost, because you can go to your members and say, hey, this is good information. So when you got that TA and you're going back and say, yeah, we couldn't get this, but our attorney and our service rep from the IFF said that there's, this is no way we're going to get this, so we dropped it. That kind of gives you some leverage. So use those resources. And your second part says, do you recommend using an attorney as little as possible? I mean, a lot of it depends on your bankroll. Let's be honest, it's all about money. If you got a ton of money, maybe you want to include them a little more. But again, you have a ton of resources out there. You use your service reps, use your e-board at the state, use your other members. You've got a lot of people with a lot of knowledge and experience. They're not obviously attorneys, but they've been doing a lot of this stuff. And they're going to tell you, like, if I get a local that calls me with some crazy thing, I'm going to be like, no, we need to call your attorney on this, because I can't help you here. Or I've had other ones where I'm like, oh yeah, I've dealt with this before. I would do this, and basically it's you're on your way. So that's a good question. I hope that answered your question, Joe. If you need anything clarification, just raise your hand or type something else in there. I'm not seeing.
I'll add a couple of follow-ups to that too, real quick.
Thank you.
My local president is our district vice president and an IFF field service rep. And in our last negotiations, he was lead negotiator. We're negotiating with a very, very difficult employer. And they were very, very close to a TA. They just couldn't quite get that last little bit over the edge, and they ended up bringing the lawyer in for one day, one probably 10-hour day, and he was able to get the deal done. So
yeah,
sometimes, if you're going to use a lawyer, bring them to the table. That varies based on the local and where you're at in the process, and both parties really. So it can be beneficial. We ended up signing a contract and not going to arbitration this last contract. So in our case, it did work out well that time.
That's perfect. And a 10-hour day of your attorney is way cheaper than an arbitration. So I popped this back up on here because I did want to mention that union seminar on May 22nd, 23rd, there's going to be a whole track on negotiations. And I saw at the beginning, we had like 70+% of you have never done a contract. So there's going to be a whole collective bargaining seminar piece there from just brand new negotiator to a seasoned negotiator. There'll be tracks in there for you to help make you a better negotiator. So make sure you put that on your calendar. And like I said, there's that survey at the end. So if you could please fill that survey out. And any other questions before we close? I'm not seeing anything else. We're a little over. We got one question here. Do we know where the seminar is at? They're trying to lock the location down. The last I heard, and again, this is just tentative right now, brother, is it's going to look like it's going to be at that Rock Financial place down by Novi. I think that's where they're looking at holding it. Like I said, I haven't seen the, I know Secretary Treasurer Chesney is still working on the logistics of all that, but I believe that's where it's at, but don't hold me to that. It could be, you could find something else between now and then. So sorry, brother, I can't help you any more than that. All right, anyone else? Okay. Well, thank you very much, everyone, for attending today. I hope you picked up some good information. Again, this is a great springboard to your steps on becoming a better negotiator. And it is a process. As like I said, I've been doing this over 20 years, negotiating contracts, and I learn something every single time I do one. So continue to find opportunities to get better and educated. And I hope you enjoyed this program and you got something out of it. I'd like to thank both the other co-presenters, Andy and Ken, for their time. Thank you very much. And you guys have a great day.
Thank you, Sean. Thanks, everybody, for paying attention today.
Have a good day.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah, bye.
Hey, Bill. Oops, he's out.
John?
Yeah, he had raised his hand.
Hey, buddy, I'm right here.
Okay, go ahead, Bill.
Hey, real nice job. I'll send you guys the, I did a comments page. Are you still there, Andy?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay. The last one, you guys did great. The economic versus non-economic examples were awesome. Real good job on the IFF services and, everything.
Let me hold on for a second. Let me hold on for a second.